We finished off our study last week. We ended up to complete that study. We're going to be talking tonight about the two witnesses that are talked about in Revelation 11, verses 1 through 6. Pat, read those verses for us.
I was given a reed like a measuring rod and was told, go and measure the temple of God and the altar with its worshippers. But exclude the outer court. Do not measure it, because it has been given to the Gentiles. They will trample on holy city for 42 months, and I will appoint my witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. They are the two olive trees and two lampstands, and they stand before the Lord of the earth.
Now, these two appear at the very first 42 months of the tribulation time period. They are going to assist folks in the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. They also are going to be the ones who are going to, on earth, be announcing the plagues as the angels in heaven are prepared, each one of them, to blow the trumpet and to start the plagues. And as they begin to do those things, then these witnesses are going to announce them. You see, that's why they're so hated. They're going to be on earth saying, get ready, here comes the next judgment, and the judgment is going to come. And so those on earth begin to blame the two witnesses for bringing all this down upon their head. That's why they rejoice at the middle of the tribulation time period when the Antichrist kills the two witnesses. So when you look at this, they are going to announce these plagues coming on the earth. Now, let's talk about the three temples that have been in Jerusalem, or will be. First was Solomon's temple. You'll find that 2 Chronicles 3. That was destroyed by the Babylonians. It was rebuilt by Ezra, and that was Solomon's temple. The second temple in John 2:20 was destroyed by the Romans and was never rebuilt. It was destroyed in 70 A.D. Then the third temple that will be in Jerusalem is the tribulation temple. It is going to be built in the first 42 months of the tribulation time period. Now, when we study this, there are three New Testament references to the future tribulation temple. I'm going to stop and pause on your notes. When I was putting them together in outline form, if you find yourself out of outline, I'm going to apologize to you. Some of it may be missing because I was doing that late this afternoon. So as far as your outline's concerned, there's a lot of information on it, but in case I miss something and it's not right by the outline, please forgive me on that, okay? So when we begin to study this, Hello? Mike check. Cannot hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Testing? Okay, good. Thanks. That is better, isn't it? I better not shout now, had I? All right. Now, here are the three New Testament references in the future tribulation temple. Number one, Matthew 24:15. The abomination occurs in the holy place. 2 Thessalonians 2:4. The Antichrist will sit in the temple in Jerusalem. Revelations 11, we just read them 1 and 2. The temple is measured, but the outer court is not measured. Those are the references to a temple, a tribulation temple, and as you well know, there's not one sitting over there now. This is not the temple on these three things that they were talking about in Jerusalem in John's day. It was destroyed, as I said, in 70 A.D. It is not the heavenly temple that it's talking about here. Why? Because you can book, there's not going to be a Gentile that's going to trample the outer court in the temple in heaven. This will be a rebuilt temple in Jerusalem where the abomination takes place in Matthew 24:15 through 21. Now, once the church age is completed, the two witnesses are going to minister for 42 months Then the image of the beast is set up in Jerusalem. Now, how in the world can these Jews during this time period build the temple? This mount that sits over there in Arabic is called Haram al-Sharif. It was expanded by Herod in 20 BC. Underneath the mount itself are numerous arches and rooms that support what is above. Those of you going to Israel on this trip, I would imagine you're going to get to go into the tunnels that go along the western wall, and you will find and see these huge arches and these big 25, 30 foot long foundation stones that are deep, 20, 30 feet deep in the earth of the temple. It's an amazing thing. And so when you look at that, you'll see these arches, and behind these arches and rooms that support what is above. These arches, and many in that tunnel, when you pass by them, you will see that they are sealed up. They were not necessarily sealed up back during the time of the temple. They probably led into chambers that are underneath the Temple Mount. But the Muslims do not want you in those chambers any longer. There were old beams from the mosque, the Dome of the Rock, that were replaced in the 1930s. They were aged and examined, and they were 9th century BC. So that is when the dome was probably built, 9th century, which shows you Jews had a presence on this mountain long, long before the Muslims ever came onto the mountain. On August 21st, 1969, a fire was actually set by a tourist at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which also sits on top of the mountain. There are two mosques, the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. There are 4 problems with building a temple on this mount. Number 1, the Muslims have had total control of this mount for centuries. Ever since 638 AD, they have controlled the Temple Mount. Again, 2 Islamic mosques are up there. I named them for you. Muslims, number 3, would never permit a Jew to build beside their mosque. They're just not going to permit that. Muslim law teaches that such property, the property a mosque sits on, must forever remain a mosque. Those are all problems that are presented about building a temple on the mount. However, I'll paint for you some possible scenarios about how this temple could get built during that time period. Number 1, as I've mentioned to many of you, and as I will talk to you, I believe that there is a battle of Gog and Magog, talked about in Ezekiel 38 and 39, that is still yet to be fought. That will be a devastating war. And after this battle of Gog and Magog, the Muslims are completely defeated. Only 1/6 of the Islamic coalition armies remain. You'll find that in Ezekiel 39 and verse 2. 1/6 remain. Ezekiel says in 39 and 9, it takes 7 years to burn the weapons and 7 months to begin burying the dead. There is such devastation. I don't think it's an accident that I believe, and part of the reason I believe that Gog and Magog will be fought at the beginning of the tribulation. It may signal it in, it may anchor it in, it's going to be close proximity, is simply the fact that it took 7 years to burn all the weapons that were used in that war. But there's also another key there. It says they're burning weapons. It must be such devastation, the world, and nobody wants to see this ever happen again. So they're willing to burn the weapons of war at this time. Now, Daniel 9:27 says there's going to be a signed covenant that occurs during this time period. This covenant with the Jews is signed for 7 years, Daniel 9:27. It is a false peace accord that is signed with Israel. This particular peace accord, when signed, could give the Jews a legal contract to build a temple of worship on top of this mountain. Why? Remember, Muslims worship on Friday, Jews worship on Saturday, Christians worship on Sunday. And so it is possible that the prophet Elijah, which I believe is going to be one of the two witnesses, is going to be involved in the matter of the rebuilding of this temple. It is believed and said in Malachi 4:5, Elijah is said to return before the great and terrible day of the Lord. So Elijah will come, and I believe he's going to be one of the two witnesses. I think he will be actively involved in the rebuilding of the temple during the first 42 months of the tribulation. Elijah must come, and Matthew 17:11 says he must come and restore all things. So here's another clue that Elijah is going to play a huge role in making sure that this temple gets back. Why? Well, the restoration of the temple is going to be extremely important to the Jews, and that's why I think Elijah will lead out in that. How in the world are they going to be able to build a temple on this mount? It has been discussed before with the Muslims, but has been totally rejected. Matter of fact, all the way back to the administration of Bill Clinton, he suggested that we build a shrine to the Jews, which is a temple, to leave the mosque where they are, and then build a Christian church on top of the mount and divide it up 3 ways and be able to worship Friday for the Muslims, Saturday for the Jews, and Sunday for the Christians. That was suggested by Bill Clinton, but was soundly defeated and turned down by Yasser Arafat. It has been broached before. It has been suggested before. Today, there is plenty of room, and when y'all go to Israel in a couple of weeks, and you get to go on the mount, notice on the northern side of the Dome of the Rock, there is plenty of room to construct a temple. I don't have the figures with me, but go and study and see the dimensions of the temple. The temple was not a real large building, by the way. Okay? When you see the Temple Mount and all the walls around it, you see the walls that was around. The temple was a relatively small building that was sitting on the mountaintop. So you'll see there's plenty of room for the temple to be built on top of the mount in that area that is north of the Dome of the Rock. The outer court, Revelations 11:2 we just read, the outer court is going to be given to who? The Gentiles. So you see, the dome may very well remain right where it is, because if you built the temple in the area I'm talking about, the dome would be sitting in the outer court, and so the outer court would be given over to who? The Gentiles. So everything is fitting into prophecy here for there to be a possibility that a temple could be built. I believe the rebuilding of this temple is linked to the two witnesses. The very first reference that you see to this is found in Zechariah 4 and verses 9 through 14. Zechariah in these verses saw the rebuilding of the temple in his day, and he saw it in the prophetic future. You'll find that in Zechariah 4:9. Zechariah saw the 2 olive branches pouring out the golden oil. Isn't that amazing compared to what you just read in Revelation? Find that in Zechariah 4:12. He saw the 2 anointed ones standing before the God of the whole earth. Zechariah 4:14. Zechariah had a picture of these 2 witnesses. Most believe one witness is Elijah, and many of them believe that the other will be either Moses or Enoch. found in Malachi 4:5. And we'll get to that in just a little bit. I can tell you I don't really have a problem. There are many good arguments for them being either one, that of which Moses was in the transfiguration with Jesus. However, I want to give you the theory of what I believe, and I believe the second witness will be Enoch and Elijah. They're going to be the two witnesses. Why do I believe that? Number one, both are Old Testament prophets, and Revelation 11:10 said the witnesses are prophets. Number two, both have never died. Hebrews 9:27 says, it is appointed unto man once to die. As you know, Elijah went up in a chariot, and Enoch said he was walking one day and was taken by God. He was there and he was gone. Does not register a death for Enoch. Number three, Enoch called down fire from heaven. Revelation 11:5 said these prophets are going to be able to call down fire from heaven. Number four, Elijah closed up the heavens for 42 months. Don't talk to me about coincidences in the Bible. He closed up the heavens for 42 months. These two witnesses are going to close the heavens for 42 months. It's going to be a drought. It's going to be no rain. You'll find that in Revelation 26. Enoch prophesied about the returning of the Lord in judgment. So folks, when we begin to take a look at these two, both are mentioned by the early fathers, and I'm talking about the ante-Nicene fathers of the very early church, first century, second century. Many of them believed that the two witnesses would be both Elijah and Enoch. And I really, when you go back and study some of the writings and the belief of these early first century Christian leaders, these early fathers, many of them had been there, they've done that, they've seen it, they've heard it fresh. And so I have a tendency when I read what they say to really take to heart many of the things that they talked about. I want you to also notice the one reason that I don't think that it's Moses is that Moses died. And Deuteronomy 34:5 says Moses died and God buried him. At the transfiguration, Moses again, he represented the law, and Elijah represented the prophets at transfiguration. And these are going to be two prophets that are going to be these two witnesses, which is why I think it will be Enoch. Now, how about a Jewish interest in the temple? When I first started going over there many years ago, there just wasn't that big an interest in the Jewish people in necessarily building a temple. Especially if you were to go back, and I didn't go this early, but back in the 70s and 80s, they were just trying to survive, fought the 6-day war, Battle of Yom Kippur, and they were trying to battle. But once that Temple Mount got taken over, then you begin to gradually see a desire and a thought come among them about a Jewish temple. Again, there's not been a temple in Jerusalem since 70 A.D. There are some in Israel who've taken an interest in rebuilding that temple. But the two Islamic mosques are still the challenge there. In 1967, Jewish paratroopers were on the Temple Mount, and they had control of the mount. I have made this statement before, and I'm going to tell you, in the great, wonderful will of God, I think there is a permissible will that happens sometimes, and I think there's a perfect will. When I study Scripture, every time that God sent Israel in to drive out the heathen, when you study the Old Testament, what did he always tell them to do? Kill them all or drive them all out of the land. That's what they were always instructed to do. Yet in 1967, when they went into Jerusalem and they took over the Temple Mount, that great one-eyed General Moshe Dayan turned around and he gave the keys to the Temple Mount back to the Muslims. In the eyes of the Muslims, they believe that the Jews and the Christians are occupying what they call their land. I just have to believe that a perfect will of God would have been to go in, take over the mountain, establish it a total Jewish state, and get the heathen out. Always what happened to Israel, go study the Old Testament. Every time they did not drive out the ones who God said do it to, what always happened? They always came back to be a thorn in their side. So what are the Palestinians now? Constantly, ever since 1975, and that was given back, have been a thorn in the side of Israel, even to the extent of lobbying missiles from the Gaza Strip. So that's just my opinion that I'm going to share with you about that I'm not sure that God's perfect will would have been take it over.
They've actually been a thorn in their side since Ishmael.
That's right. They have been. They have been. But, the thorns only remained when the Jewish people allowed them against what God told them to do. So here we are, and we're talking about the people who are building the mount. That the Muslims don't want it. They're against it. They fight it at every turn. But there are organizations that's working to rebuild this third temple. They began early on by building small vessels and trumpets. And every time that we would go to Jerusalem, you would see they built a little bit more. And the Temple Institute is the name of this place. And you see more vessels and more things and more deal. And then you hear about the red heifer now has been bred. And they found a purebred red heifer now. All of these things are an important part of the temple rituals that have to be done. They began early on to sew the garments of the priests and the Levites in getting ready in preparation for the temple. They made a copy of the menorah. When you go to Israel, you'll be able to see that more in the Jewish section. They've got a copy of that menorah that they built there. They are continually working on many of the items that are going to go in the temple when it's rebuilt. There is a school of Levites that has already been established. Rabbi HaKohen, who is the founder. In case you do not know it, anybody with the name Kohen is from and probably a descendant of Levi. And they're direct descendants, and they've been able to prove that by DNA. They can trace back the descendants from Levi in order to make them the priests that are going to occupy the temple when the temple is rebuilt so that they'll have a proper priest. They've already got a school of Levites established to do this. They're building models. They are teaching the students sacrifices and how to perform sacrifices. There is a great story I heard about the Temple Mount, those tunnel walls. Rabbi Yehuda Getz, back in 1981, was viewing these tunnels, and he went down into these tunnels. Rabbi Getz claimed he actually saw the Ark of the Covenant. When you go in these tunnels and you see these arks, there's actually one of those arks down there that Rabbi Getz actually knocked a hole in where it had been sealed up. And he and a companion were able to open it up, and because of what they believe about putting their eyes on the Ark of the Covenant, took a mirror and held it up and beheld what he considered the Ark of the Covenant. What happened is when they were busting the wall and constructing it, the Muslims on top of the mount heard them, came down and created such a huge ruckus they immediately had to stop what they were doing, and the walls were sealed back up, and so they were never able to drill or go or see what's behind all of those arches. But when you walk that tunnel, you will see arch after arch going down through there. And I just want you to imagine in your mind what may lie on the other side of all of those arches when you're under that Temple Mount. Isn't that a beautiful picture? And so they are continually working on all of these items. They have the school. They have what they call the Temple Mount Faithful. Gershon Solomon was the founder of the Temple Mount Faithful. He fought himself in the war of 1967, and he has attempted on numerous occasions to move a cornerstone in on top of the mount because he's ready to build. So there is great interest in Israel now for rebuilding that temple. They have also begun to reform the Sanhedrin. This Sanhedrin, when you study the Bible, was the highest Jewish legal tribunal in ancient Israel. In October 2004, in the town of Tiberias, where y'all probably will visit, you will find that Israel met and several rabbis met, and they launched a new Sanhedrin in 2004 from the city of Tiberias. Rabbi Yisrael Ariel is one of the participating rabbis who reinstituted this Sanhedrin. All of the pieces are falling in place here. What in the world then is going to be the purpose of the two witnesses? In Revelation 11:1, they are linked to the measuring of the temple in Jerusalem. Number 2, they are to testify to the Jewish remnant in Jerusalem. They are going to be testifying to them, telling them about Jesus. Malachi 4:5 says, they turn the hearts of the fathers to the children. That's going to be part of their responsibility. I want you to know, I honestly believe that the rebuilding of the temple that is going to trigger the conflict in Jerusalem. Elijah must come and restore all things. Elijah would know the tribe of each and every Jew. That's why I know when those 12,000 from each of the tribes, Elijah is going to know who belongs to which tribe. And in Jewish tradition, Elijah is expected to precede the appearing of the Messiah. Isn't that great? I just think when you study what these two witnesses are going to be, they're two of the most interesting characters for what their role is going to be during the tribulation. Now, there's 3 major points I want to make. They will have great power for miracles. They will be able to send both fire and plagues while they're here those 42 months. That's according to Revelation 11:6. No man will be able to harm them for 1,260 days. And after that time period, they will be killed. You'll find that in Revelation 11:3. I believe possibly at the dedication of the temple, the Antichrist is going to enter Jerusalem at that time. You'll find that in Daniel 9:27. It all begins to fall into place. 6 things are going to occur in Revelation chapter 11, verses 7 through 15. Here they are. Number 1, both prophets are killed by the Antichrist when he invades Jerusalem. Revelation 11:7. Number 2, their bodies will be laid in the street for 3.5 days. Revelation 11:9. Number 3, men will send gifts in celebration of these 2 men being killed. You'll find that in Revelation 11:10. I told you they're going to blame them for bringing the plagues. And they're going to bring gifts when they find out they're being killed. Number 4, they will be raised from the dead 3.5 days after laying in the street. Revelation 11:11. I hope the Lord will pause just long enough to let us see that event. Number 5, a great earthquake will strike the city. 7,000 people are killed with this earthquake. You'll find that in Revelation 11:13. And number 6, the Antichrist will make a move to set himself up in Jerusalem. That's Revelation 13, verses 1 through 11. Now, after their ascension from Jerusalem, then the 7th angel blasts his trumpet. Get the picture. 6 angels up, blowing the 6 trumpets, causing the plagues. 2 witnesses on earth, announcing all of these things that are beginning to happen on earth. And the 7th angel blasts the trumpet in Revelation 13, 15. This is the time that a judgment for the righteous is set to begin in heaven. So in our chronological order, we're here now. And it's happened. And now we're going to talk about the Bema seat of Christ. The Bema takes place. This is where you get to the notes from tonight. In case you wondered where I've been, I was finishing the notes up that you were supposed to have had from last week. So the Bema seat takes place. Revelation 11:18, Pat.
The nations were angry, and your wrath has come. The time has come for judging the dead and for rewarding your servants, the prophets, and your people who revere your name, both great and small, and for destroying those who destroy the earth.
The judgment seat of Christ is at the throne of Christ. The great white throne judgment you find in Revelation 20, 11 through 13 is at God's throne. So get these 2 things in order. The Bema seat is at the throne of Jesus. The great white throne judgment is before God himself and his throne. The judgment seat of Christ. I want to give you some scriptures. You can write them down about judgment seat of Christ in Scripture. Romans 14, 10 through 12. 2 Corinthians 5, 10. 1 Corinthians 4, 5. 1 Timothy 5, 24 through 25. Romans 2, 16. 2 Timothy 4, 1. Now, at this judgment, this Bema seat that we're talking about, it's going to occur at the throne of God. It is called the judgment seat of Christ. You'll find a reference to that in Romans 14:10. It will begin at the moment the temple doors in heaven are opened in Revelation 11:19. It will be, this judgment, this Bema seat, is going to be for saints, prophets, servants, and those who feared God's name. You'll find that in Revelation 11:18. It will be to see who is going to be rewarded and who is not going to be rewarded. I want you to note that the word for reward, which is found in Revelation 11:18, is mistos, and it means a payment for your works. So those are the rewards that are going to be given out at the Bema seat. Matthew 10, 41 and 42. We're going to talk a little bit about the types of rewards. 3 types. The first is talked about is a prophet's reward. That is receiving and believing the word of God that is preached. If you do that, you're going to be able to receive the prophet's reward. Number 2, a righteous man's reward. Receiving a righteous man and his works, that is going to give you a righteous man's reward. If you have been righteous, performing righteous works. A disciple's reward. A disciple's reward is giving a cup of water, feeding those who need feeding, caring for the needy, Those are, and you can add to that list, but I don't need to. But that is going to be a disciple's reward for those who have been involved and willing to do those things. You're going to find these rewards are going to be given by the different levels of obedience that we have. Matthew 23:14 and 15 says punishment is also by degree. Hypocrites will be judged more severely than others at this bema seat. Faithful people at this seat will be rewarded greater than others. 1 Corinthians 15:40 through 44 tells us about the rewards for the righteous. Now, there are three vessels that are mentioned. They are, I believe, the three levels of character that these people standing before the judgment seat have. You'll find that in 1 Corinthians 3, verses 10 through 15. I want you to notice in Revelation the types of materials that are brought before, or in the 1 Corinthians, the type of material that's brought forth. There are both earthly and precious metals. I want you to notice the texture of the materials. Some are able to endure as foundation. Others are going to crack. Notice the testing of the material by fire. Some are refined by the fire and become pure, and others are burned up like wood, hay, and stubble. Let's take a look at the word crowns, which is part of the reward system that you're going to be receiving at the bema seat in the Bible. First, in Proverbs 4:1 through 9, you have the crown of wisdom and understanding that's mentioned. In Proverbs 12:4 and 10 through 31, this is reserved for my wife. It is the crown of a good wife to her husband. Isn't that wonderful? Linda, you've got an automatic crown laying up for you in heaven. You have been a good wife. No, you've been a great wife. Woo! But you've got one crown waiting on you. Number 3. Most everybody in this room has this one. The crown of a silver-haired person. You'll find that Proverbs 16:31 and Proverbs 20 and 29. There is a crown of the grandchildren that's found in Proverbs 17:6. And then, obviously, in Matthew 27 through 31, there is a crown of thorns. Let's talk about these crowns of rewards in the New Testament. See, the Romans and the Greek used to give crowns as symbols of victory and as rewards in their games they had. Winners of the Olympics were given crowns woven with leaves. They were woven with wild olive branches. In the Pythian games, the laurel was presented as a reward. In the Nemean games, there was parsley used to make a crown and was given to the winners. Others used the leaves of a pine tree in order to do this. And the Romans prepared a civic crown for the one who saved the life of a citizen. So there were all kinds of crowns that were given out during this time. These crowns all faded away. But the crowns that's going to be given one day, folks, by the King of Kings will never fade because they are going to be incorruptible crowns. Let's look at the 5 crowns in the Bible. 1 Corinthians 9, verse 24 through 25. That is the incorruptible crown that you're going to be able to be given to you at the bema seat. The crowns are non-perishable. They are incorruptible. They will never rust, and they will never decay. This crown is given for those who run and complete their race on earth. That's Hebrews 12, 1 and 2. I have run the good race. I have fought the good fight. Those that were able to do that, they are going to get this incorruptible crown. You see, when you are running this race of life, Hebrews 12:1 said you've got to lay aside the weights and the sins that weigh you down. And if you were able to do that and run your race while you were here, then you have before you coming an incorruptible crown. 2 Timothy 2:4 says, a good soldier will not entangle himself with the affairs of this life. If you have avoided tangling yourself up with, the affairs of this life, you've got an incorruptible crown waiting for you. Number 2, second crown. It's the crown of rejoicing. You'll find that in 1 Thessalonians 2, verses 19 through 20. This is often called a soul winner's crown. As soul winners, what? What do we do when we see a sinner being saved? We rejoice. So this is the crown of rejoicing. Number 3, the crown of life in James 1:12. This crown is given to the overcomer. It is the crown of Revelation 2:10. The overcomers. Those who die martyred are also going to receive a special crown in Revelation 2:10. Those suffering severe persecution and remain faithful are going to receive a crown of life. Same crown of life found in James 1:12. Number 4, the crown of glory. 1 Peter 5:4. 1 Peter 5:4, when you go study it, was addressed to ministers and to pastors. So this is a very unique crown. Those ministers who are found faithful to their flock and to their ministry receive a special crown. And oh, by the way, I believe that includes ministers and workers. Some of you are very faithful to your ministry of missions that you're involved in. I believe this crown of glory will be one of the crowns that you get to be involved in, because you have been faithful to your ministry and to your flock, and this special crown is given to those who are able to do that. Number 5, the crown of righteousness, found in 2 Timothy 4 and 8. Those who believe in and love the appearing of the Lord are going to be the ones who receive this crown. Hello, you're here studying Revelation. You know what? You know what? This crowd loves the appearing of the Lord. The crown of righteousness is for those who believe and love the appearing of the Lord. They are going to receive this crown. Those who live righteous on earth are going to receive this crown. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Now you know why I always talk to you about get up every day, look and love the appearing of Jesus Christ. It leads to righteousness, and folks, there's your crown. It's going to be waiting on you. Now let's summarize these 5 crowns. 1 Corinthians 9, 24 through 25. An incorruptible crown is for running the race and finishing it. Number 2, 1 Thessalonians 2, 19 through 20. Crown of rejoicing. That is for winning souls to Jesus Christ. Number 3, James 1:12. A crown of life for overcoming temptation. Number 4, 1 Peter 5:4. A crown of glory for ministers, for pastors, for workers who've taken on their ministry. Number 5, a crown of righteousness for those who love Christ appearing. Now, there are some other crowns that's talked about in the book of Revelation. The 24 elders, when they were seen with what? Crowns made out of gold. Okay? That's also mentioned in Revelation 4:4. They had them on their heads. Christ has a gold crown himself, reaping the harvest in Revelation 14:14. In Revelation 19 and 12, it says Christ has on his head many crowns. I personally believe that's the conquering of all the nations he does. He's going to be wearing many crowns because he's going to rule the earth. Believers are promised crowns in 1 Corinthians 9, verses 24 and 25. Now, there are two words that are known in the Greek language for crowns. Diadeo means to bind round, especially the blue band. These heads of state, these Persian, if you remember, they used to wear these headbands around. It was a blue band marked with white, used to bind the turban of a Persian king. Alexander the Great adopted this whenever he was king. And among the Greeks and Romans, it was a badge of royalty. This particular type of crown is going to be used by the dragon in Revelation 12:3, by the beast in Revelation 13:1, and is used by Jesus Christ himself in 19 and 12. There's another crown called the Stephanos. The other one was the diadem. This is Stephanos. In a contest, a reward or a prize. That's the crown. A token of public honor for military ability. It was worn at the coming of a king. It could be worn or woven out of oak and ivy and myrtle or olive. It many times is an imitation of these were in gold. Christ wears the royal crown, and we wear a victor's crown if we overcome. See? Beautiful picture of these crowns in heaven. Your rewards can be lost or given to another. I am coming soon. Revelation 3:11. I am coming soon. Hold on to what you have, so no one will take your crown. Wow. Jesus was speaking to the church at Philadelphia in Revelation 3, verses 7 through 12. Christ said about them, they have an open door, but they have little strength. In Revelation 3:8. Wow, what a description. A kind of weak-kneed. Christ encourages them to continue, and whatever you do, hold fast to what you have in Revelation 3:11. Holding fast means to keep in check and to continue to guard something very precious that you have. Christ told all 7 churches, I know your works. Guard them, folks. Do not let any man take your works away from you. Now, what do you mean by that? Oh, let's say Christ at some point in your life said, I want you to go spend 6 months on the mission field. Yeah, you turn it down. You decide that's not the thing for you to do. God calls you into something, you're pretty sure it's God's call, yet you take another route. I promise you, God's going to replace it, and whatever he needed to accomplish, he's going to have somebody step to the plate and take that crown. So always be careful and be very attentive, and if God tells you to do something, do it. Don't turn down the Holy Spirit. Go out and step out in faith, and don't let any other man get your reward. We work together for a reward. Okay? Listen to 1 Corinthians 3, 5, and 8. Who then is Paul? Listen to this. Who is Paul? Who is Apollos? But ministers through whom you believed, as the Lord gave to each one. That's all Paul and Apollos are. Just ministers to whom, that's who you heard the Lord from. So then neither he who plants is anything, nor he who waters, but God who gives the increase. Listen to that, folks. It's not you. You may be a vessel. You may be the one to plant. You may be the one that waters. But it is God himself who gives the increase. And then it goes on to say, now he who plants and he who waters are one. If you're a planter or a waterer, you're still one in Christ. Why do we always say we're one body? You know, each one of us has our own gifts, but we've got to work together because the whole body as a whole has to work together here. Now he who plants and he who waters are one. And each one of us will receive his own reward according to your own labor. Amen? Your buddy can't get your reward for you. Your mama can't get your reward. Your husband can't get your reward, nor your wife. Each who participated in their own walk is going to get their reward according to his own labor. Yes, ma'am?
Where's the crowns mentioned at?
Where's that found? 1 Corinthians.
About the crowns specifically.
Which crowns are you talking about? I've listed about...
The 5 major crowns that you mentioned.
Let me get that to you after I finish. Okay? There are 3 groups of people and their works. Number 1, there's the group of people that perform good works. That's found in 1 Timothy 6, 18 and 19. Number 2, those who died and did not perform works for God. Titus 1:16 talks about that group. Third, those who have worked evil works. 2 Timothy 4:14. That's the 3 groups of people that I can find in Scripture that talks about and their works that they have. You are saved by grace, but you are rewarded according to your works. Ephesians 2, 8 and 9, Revelations 2 and 19. So we're now continuing to talk about the Bema seat and giving you as much information as we can find looking at other scriptures about this particular judgment that's going to happen at the Bema seat. Now, so we're in heaven, and the temple in heaven is open. Look at Revelation 11:19. And it's open as the Bema is occurring in the heavenly temple at this time. Now, all of a sudden, you're going to find that the ark is being seen. Now, why is the ark all of a sudden seen now at this point in Revelation? Remember, the ark was always accessed on the Day of Atonement. It is when the priest carried the blood of atonement into the ark. The original ark is in heaven, and judgment will occur near the altar and near the ark. This is the Holy of Holies that is in heaven, and it is located behind the throne of God. Always remember, the priest stood up on atonement and could not sit down until when? Atonement was completed. So, while the judgment for earth is being prepared, at this point in time, Satan is going to be expelled from heaven down to earth. Now, when you read about this particular thing, and it happens here at this time, first I want to tell you, where in the world does Satan reside? Well, there's a little study that says where his abodes are. These are the abodes of Satan. He abides in the temple in heaven. That's Isaiah 14:13. He resides in the heavenly Eden. That's Ezekiel 28:13. He resides in the earthly Eden, Genesis 3:1. He resides and abides in the earth because he walks up and down to and fro, according to Job 1:7. He is abiding in the second heaven, according to Ephesians 2:2. He abides in the earthly Jerusalem, according to Revelation 13. He abides in the abyss for 1,000 years, according to Revelation 20:1-2. And he abides in the lake of fire for all eternity, found in Revelation 20:10. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about Revelation chapter 12. Look at Revelation 12, verses 1 through 12. We're not going to take the time to read them. I gave a great discourse on Revelation 12 back during the fall, simply because there was the Revelation 12 sign that occurred back in September in the cosmic heavens. You're going to read about them when you read chapter 12 here. I want to take you back and remind you about some of the beliefs in John's day. John lived in a time of Greek and Roman culture which believed in many gods and many goddesses. In Greek mythology, there was Ares, which was the god of war, Poseidon, which was the god of the sea, and there was Zeus, who was the god of the sky. And the Jewish people were all very familiar with these myths and with these legends because they were all around them. There are some Greek words that are used in the New Testament. Chronos in Matthew 2:7. He was the titan of time, and this word is used for linear time, chronos, in the Bible. Tartarus in 2 Peter 2:4, that's the deepest chamber in the underworld, and that is the residence of the fallen angels. Uranus in Acts 10:11 is the word used in the New Testament for heaven. Hades in Matthew 11:23 was the guardian of the underworld, which is translated as hell in the New Testament. These common Greek words used in the time of Christ, they were very common and used for time, they were used for hell, and they were used for heaven. And the Romans and the Greeks were very familiar back during this time with cosmic activity. Both the Romans and the Greeks had astronomers, much like the astronomers that came by the Magi. Where do we know them from? Story of the Bible, who followed the star. Most all of these countries and everyone, Romans and Greeks, had astronomers. You'll find that in Matthew 2:1. Both the Greeks and Romans believed in 12 constellations and the planets. God said the sun, moon, and stars were what? For signs and seasons in Genesis 1:14. Joseph dreamed of what? Sun, moon, and stars bowing down before him in Genesis 37:9. The symbolism that is described here is used in Revelation. God used cosmic symbols here in Revelation 12 that people absolutely understood back in the day of John. God used symbols of nations as beasts. They knew these nations and they associated with it. They used symbols that people understood. God repeated to John the apocalyptic symbolism that was originally revealed to who? Daniel. So these were things very familiar to the Jews back during this time, as John was describing them. You see, these symbolisms were a description of the empires that Daniel described in his book. In Daniel 7:4, the lion emblem is Babylon, and the heavenly emblem was what? Leo, the lion constellation. In Daniel 7:5, the bear described is Media Persia, and the heavenly emblem is Ursa Major, which is the bear. In Daniel 8:5, the goat is Greece, and the matching heavenly emblem is Sagittarius, the goat. So you see now, when he's describing all of these things he's seeing in Revelation 12 that all of us have thought so mysterious, it wasn't so mysterious to them back during John's day. God used this cosmic symbolism in the book of Revelation. Why? Because people back then understood these symbols. Now, how about the woman in travail that's explained about? Look how amazingly this ties in. The woman in travail. The yearly solar cycle begins with Virgo, the Virgin constellation, and ends with what? Leo, the lion. Isn't that amazing how that turned out, that the gospel began with the Virgin Mary and concludes with the Lion of Judah? Don't tell me that's not a pattern and a type and a shadow. Joseph saw the sun, moon, and stars, Genesis 37:9. Thus, the woman that is described in Revelation 12 has got to be Israel. And they understood that. And the symbols of Satan in the Bible, okay, in Genesis 3, Satan is what? The serpent in the garden. And he came out as the tempter. In Job 40, the behemoth is a prophetic picture of the future false prophet. In Job 41, the Leviathan is a prophetic picture of the dragon and Antichrist kingdom. And so when you study these things, the dragon Satan in heaven, there are two emblems that describes Satan. The dragon, or Draco, is the center of the heavenly circuit with his eyes on the virgin. Go look at that in Revelation 12 in the vision that John's seeing, and now you have a serpent here, a dragon, and he's got his eyes right on the virgin. There's another constellation up there that is called Hydra. It is the serpent constellation. Oh, by the way, coincidentally, it takes up 1/3 of the circuit of heaven. Not a coincidence. 1/3 of fallen angels. This serpent does. Look at Revelation 12:4. So you have this dragon and this serpent. And they are literally in the constellation looking upon and ready to devour Israel. 4 names are given to Satan in Revelation 12:9. Great dragon. He is the god of this world. Old serpent. He is the deceiver, just like he deceived Adam and Eve. He's called the devil, which literally means he is the slanderer. He stands before the throne of God, slandering your name every chance he gets. And he's called Satan, which literally means your adversary. So those are 4 names given to this dragon. The dragon is very active at this point in Revelation 12. The dragon attempts to destroy the seed of woman in Revelation 12:4. The dragon attempts to persecute the woman, Revelation 12:13. The dragon sends a flood to destroy the woman in Revelation 12:15. The dragon can't kill the woman, so he goes after the remnant in Revelation 12:17. You get the picture? All of these things are happening. That is why he tries to chase 144,000. He can't get them. He can't get them. They're raptured up the hurt. So the others, remnant, are fleeing. They flee to where I believe is going to be Petra. The man-child was caught up to the throne of God. When you look at this particular thing, the dragon can't kill the woman, so he goes after the remnant in 12:17. The Bible talks about there's a protection of the man-child. The man-child was a target of Satan in Revelation 12:4 and the target of all the fallen angels. The man-child will rule all nations with a rod of iron. The man-child was caught up to the throne of God. Now, many people talk about the interpretation of who this man-child is. The man-child can be Christ himself, which is a perfect picture of that. But it can allude to these 144,000 that are going to be taken up in Revelation 7 and 14. So it's not a problem if you look at that in either particular way, because the serpent would love to devour either and or either one of these. There is provision that's made for the woman. Israel is going to flee to the wilderness, where Revelation 12:6 says God will sustain her. Petra, again, is the area that I believe where it will occur. That's in Jordan or in Eden. You'll find the reference to that in Psalms 60, verses 6 through 12. Israel is going to survive the persecution, the flood, and Satan's wrath. That's Revelation 12, 13 through 16. They're going to remain in the wilderness for 1,260 days or 42 months. In Revelation 14, now verses 1 and 2, the 144,000 are caught up and raptured. And this is a remnant of the Jews fleeing. Oh, I did pretty good. I don't have but about 4 pages left. But we're going to stop right there. We'll begin next time on the 27th, because all of this picture here in Revelation 12 is a picture of the Day of Atonement imagery, which makes it extremely interesting, and we'll talk about that when we come back.